Hello. First, I want to announce a contest. Who can find the video? I can't find the video on. I saw there was a Chinese monk who helped Native Americans in the humanity as in the form of the just now they're forced to now they're told they're going to be a country, but now still entrenched our roles with systems, economic systems, where everyone was sickly, distinctly tortured, extorted, and enslaved three ways. Fact, human nature, enslaved. And we have other communicators for that for our founders. So I'm not a lawyer, but I could speak law some ways better than all the people of the law because of how I study what I've been sharing in videos. Also means to discern how agencies, how formal law identities of the law, even judges and prosecutors and their family members, as good people originally and still, how they would collude to sense and hurt for a breaching method. Any style, anyone not self-valuing, criminal insidiousness natures of positive uses, exclusions with the overt / insidious negative uses of the names of the sciences. And this is to speak for where and how the people pretend that everyone believes what we don't, and then they send people running in to pretend other, and how they get away with that. Because the majority of people, you guys know, we agree about things, and a few people who deny it, like there's a Joshua Julian who's been planting evidences with people that run Facebook, and with the courts, New Britain Superior Court, and with FBI in his defendant capacities, and his co-defendants, and people next to the spots and associated with all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions, who have roles planting evidence at other locations to influence such, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and sense. Recorded is our self-value roles with uses of identities of difference that are not real difference. They are predicate acts with facts roles. So A through Z, worse than witch trials, even if witch trials were made up, one thing they were about is that breaching method, which is way worse than witch trials, that was entrenched against everyone, sickly distinctly. That's why and how others too, we could observe hyper-evidentially understanding that one of the things that was entrenched was a human fact, human nature breaching method. And when you hold on to understanding things that are true always like that, you could observe other things, others or so, are blamed, not only just because nature shows us that, but also our founders communicated for us to understand that. Now, that's why it's important to understand how they got away with replacing what James Madison's plan was, and how our founders communicated for us to communicate for themselves. And that has been changed. And our founders are distinct from our presidents. And there are three natures of founders that nature shows us. But we were told that the founders wanted to be recognized as the face of James Madison and his plan, and that which George Washington agreed about to help. And we're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, but we have not been. Because it is recorded how they got away with this. And how I recorded this, you have to appreciate the hyper-evidential. And you could deny me, but don't people see me offensively people to pretend they don't believe others, even if they speak things wrong. In other words, if you have black pupils, whites of eyes, you could discern that roles with a predicate acts with facts delivery system method / criminal insidiousness system propagation and roles self-cultivating it as what would cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. and natures of desperation, and no hope but to self-value roles with natures that only means more and more to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, natures, if to be collusion with criminal insidious, not just criminal insidious natures of positives, not just ones as collusions with the negatives as simultaneously, but also with the breaching method, and also with its method of keeping also hyper-additionally simultaneously through separate and apparent motivations and from different locations locked back to the same location. All this is one of the things that nature shows us. We're all are guilty, blaming other things, others ourselves, or sensing when people bring it up. In other words, you know how many, most Americans look at New York City and think, well, it's since we were little kids. We discern the breaching method upon it, that we discerned sickly distinctly against the Native Americans and we didn't want it. Sickly distinctly against the colonists, we didn't want it. So, in other words, including the countries that they had it on, because it was on those countries too, from semi-ancient times, since before modern religious messengers, to an extent, because already sciences became criminally foreign influence, but from off them. Forgiveness. This is critical because there are other names and values, and there are other apparent motivations at each age and nature of being an individual, no matter how powerful a leader gets, too. Even if it's of a grouping of the most powerful nations. It can be a voice that's entertaining locations, areas, and states that have other things others ourselves communicate. The things our founders communicated for us to blame on the hyper simultaneous. And they communicated for us to understand how there was and is a standing communication racketeering method worse than war crimes, which is positive one way. For example, hyper positive because there's not one body capable of speaking for war crimes legitimately, or the logistics of war, because they are still syntactical possessions and collusions with predicate acts with facts, including and the differences of guilt roles, where, for example, this made collusions, including with courts at the same time, including in the World Trade Center attack context, the Ninth Circuit Court next to it, is including increasingly roles with names next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and co-defendants of his, and various natures of federal criminals. Even if that was made up, they're recorded involved with predicate acts with facts and criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents. And this is what the majority really believe and think. And who denies this has to force a quality of fact cheap in nature that needs to block people, even delay it, and have debates about the difference entertained and then that defended. Facebook, people from off the locations, like Facebook. Facebook has increasingly is communicating roles. You know, with New Britain Superior Court, Harvard Courts, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and other FBI involved with where they're using location /S. One of the ways is to pretend they don't understand people criminally foreign influenced relative to the readings of statutes criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrong. There are also criminally foreign influence uses of corners of streets with people between campuses. And like there's a Bobby Jean who says her name is Bobby Jean. I don't know her friend. They know my name. No, in other words, I was never a patron there at a strip club near. And it's no judging them or anything. It's no positive or negative or anything. No judgment. And near where they make planes. But she has roles with a whole bunch of intelligence, including judges and prosecutors, who have federal evidence as crime methods. Way worse than what they put little kids and adults in jails for and drug them. And prevent them religious rights and pretend, because they think unnatural things about religion. And they fake the conversations on a mass scale. And before they did that, they were doing this at campuses. And the same ones are planting evidences on all sides of the kids' houses, where these are predicate acts with facts methods. And they have Judge Napolitano's Facebook page involved, where recorded are the different types of police forms with digital evidences and with schools and narratives by jobs and by the value of titles and by the differences between, and like with guilt, for example. We could observe when using what we all really know and believe, unobstructed. See, people come into and lie about their motivations just to force that quality of fact, human nature, to be and stay criminal insidiousness. Some things are not natural, but as criminal insidiousness. And this needs to be spoken by bodies A through Z, everywhere this human species body stands. I'll lift our hands, boxings. Not one person has defended yin yang. So how could they defend China's name, Japan's name, Taiwan? A through Z have been systems used tactical ulterior. What's complicated about computers and what's simple about them is used tactical ulterior from how nature uses it as standing criminal insidious nature, as a certain type of victim / hyper victim. A breaching method knew it could maintain, incapable, only fathomable. Only having been heard speaking, and involved with all location /s. Where again, this breaching method blamed other things, others or selves, and everything it did was through ourselves. So it also blamed through ourselves, other things, others or selves, for all the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that were standing at the time before our founders were born, with the design of the suburbs where we begin, vaccines. This is a programming method. In other words, if YouTube wants to help, I know you have to communicate, but it has to be only communicate, no background communication, because the agencies, the identities, the law formal, they already used remotely since they were kids. They're a nature of psychopath with calmness and descriptions of emotions and of their difference and of time, the relativity of time with time treatments, where they are with bullying and logic and motivations narratives. This breaching method knew that it would have to keep the scientific value of the breaching method itself left out from all forms of sophistication. Its value, which is only increasing, because that's what nature demonstrates. A human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always, that slavery was. A human nature itself shows us to question what was slavery. See, but we have these questions. The breaching method knew we would have these natural questions. It has developed a certain type of victim / hyper victim as styles too, because nature forces styles. The nature of fighting in sports, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by nature itself. And they're about fighting, but they're about fighting by the rules. But the rules have been tactically abridged since some ancient times, and uses of simultaneous denials of that and motivations apparent. And the opposite too, to hide even worse, because there is an identity beyond A through Z. And this is more probable and is increasingly more demonstrable. We have to be able to appreciate the hyper-evidential. So even people, great people, when they make convictions by and for relative to things like crimes, they leave out the significance of the collusions with through predicate acts with facts and through database relativity to methods of that the breaching method, the proverbial devil, if you will, the proverbial shaitan, if you will. This also being associated with tactically sabotaged and unscientific readings of the religious books and how they read the law, while as those locations have state collusions, including the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices, using the evidential with the hyper-evidential. We could observe how since before their founding, they were involved with a torture, extortion, slavery method that could be observed as a predicate acts with facts method that simultaneously knew that nature uses exceptions and exception nature too. In ways it had to make this is use of location /s is one of the things that make the motivations between arrays of totally different people motivated to jump into people's conversations. Like if they mention World Trade Center predicate acts, then they have to pretend other as styles. And they have to be shown they already did that. And so they are shown to pretend, well, speak this, you're the identity law. Pretend you're looking for acts. When people act. In other words, the identities of locations differences. These identities of the law, just because they're positive, they use the truths, the positives about it, they're using it for lies too. Like with the locations needing to hide lie progressions with the databases. They've been stacking changed and faked, totally faked descriptions of what happened, why it happened, who was involved with it. This breaching method, roles knew that other names would be involved, other locations, and that could hide behind that, being hid through other. And all this is recorded, but rather than let it stay with simple, and what's complicated the way nature does it, you guys want to make debates about every little thing, dishonestly. That's different than saying, in other words, you want to prevent the value of the difference between the smallest finite detail overlooked or lied about, or the value of what came first. All the voices, in other words, two, this breaching method uses our founders communicated for us to tell about how we want, and we all want it, most of us want it demonstrated because we all discern. People pretend that they care about their jobs as their motivations. They're using that truth for a lie, for why and how they'll ignore people where mandated law tells them. Like, for example, the news knows that the intelligence community hides and has to make up fake things because they have to hide their roles with a whole bunch of different countries, for example, with the campuses. And that's been exploited by concentrating all the different courts, but concentrated with public families courts and families, and their uses of locations in these noted predicate acts for facts methods all along Route 3. There's people that know my name, I don't know the name, the whole bunch of judges that know my name. In other words, and people out of the state corrections offices tied to a Ray Collo. I mean, and a Phil Collo first. A Phil Collo is the one, is the one with Bob Chase with Whiting Forensics, who's also involved with men and women like with named Joshua Julian, involved with predicate acts on my street and violence, like with the confessions of and demonstrations of Bob Chase, of a Phil Cololo involved with a proven principal child abuser. And there were more people involved with worse than just upskirt pictures, including on Twitter. And I can't get a response for there because they're involved with Wethersfield Police and FBI and other police departments with the same house. And they're role switching and forging names and refusing to identify themselves. They have roles with fire departments, also with Russians. See, these are means where experts will use their expertise and say, "Well, I'm an expert on this." Russians and Americans have roles with psychiatry databases where they put fake things in databases because investigators and their campuses are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw. We would have had this discerned, but for this. So when you hear the news saying that they care about mental health, they're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. WFSB attaching to fake conversations with themselves. One's named Kerr, one's named DeMoro, one's named Scalora. The recorded confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with retired police chiefs from Wethersfield, also with people along Route 3. And there was reported he killed someone there. Even if that was justified for some reason, he's the one, the police chief Cintron's involved with internetworks with FBI Director Robert Luskin and judges' family members with stacking predicate acts with facts into databases behind people's backs from off campuses and preventing people from telling things and then as their roles preventing people. Why didn't you say anything? They also attach little kids and their families to fake locations, fake audio and video, and ties to police at police stations because they have roles with criminally foreign influence. They have self-value roles with countering things like criminal insidiousness by grouping criminal enterprises wrong and maintaining them, propagated that way. As collusions also intercampuses of all ages and natures and different ones that appear without connections, that's also used to hide behind where we have fact, treatment, nature, perception that is being gotten over and over on consciously at countries A through Z. Please read The Arm of Tyson. Reach. Mao Zedong. We are not supposed to put words in his mouth, but we are supposed to try to figure out with every other person at the same, because we are a species body, and the other species bodies are distinct from our own, and they're also non-distinct. So we could discern also. It is not by us or by them. It is by a hyper-simultaneous, identity of hyper-simultaneous. Yin Yang and Alpha and Omega were revealed to teach this, more probably and more demonstrably. Also relative to delusions, inherent active and progressive to the science's voices, individually grouped and together. Boxings, Romulus appears. So WFSB is the first. But WFSB has roles with other natures of journalists and their family members on Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Connecticut, involved intercities with them, planting evidences preemptively, actively, and grouped as a certain type of victim / hyper victim. But see, they won't follow. They want to have it. They want to leave it. Their screening for their roles with all foreign names, and the difference between how the Saudi attackers forced us to entertain they also set up the coalition, each country against their own, all the differences. At least that's positive. We should stay with the hyper positive because it shows us what to blame and how the breaching method uses and All natures of integrity rely upon other things, others, or selves. Blame for what has the worst roles, with the worst causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. With everything from gangs to criminal enterprises to countries A through Z, shared suits and ties counters and exceptions as collusions with that at all locations. Then further, where there are database locations, then further, as roles only known, maintain, where the sciences are also with databases, because this is exploited. There were our means to discern conscious use/s of names on and associated with all sides of criminal and civil cases in Connecticut and interstates, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. And I apologize for Connecticut and for your interstates law voices, because they came through campuses A through Z, and the difference of that being having been exploited by this child abuse method that is also multi-front against elderly, and the differences of veterans. See how veteran homes are people stacked just like that, which was only allowed to be fathomable relative to where and to how. Again, the suburbs from America to Russia and Ukraine. So before America's founders were born, the suburbs were designed, the scale and nature of it, generally, and of the streets, and with slavery entrenched sickly distinctly north and south. We're also supposed to address this and treatments of evidences in the nature of debate, inherent, active, and progressive, increasingly with evidences overlooked because they are being and haven't been used by the breaching method that propagated them, self-cultivated, self-value. Even though it hurts that person, every group difference, as it actually is, are made up. Because in other words, its identity of hyper-volume science is inseparable from all things individually grouped and together. 3 ways, even the smallest finite detail, that way. Is a source alone that is surging through all things. Well, them will not, but anyway, even force. Vaccines. Vaccines, the song that is the value of the rest through all of music, which only increase as value, even if music ceases to exist. As mutually assured destruction, and the opposite as a standing criminal insidiousness natures of peace have been used to measure and maintain time justifications relative to nature imposed threats on all sides regarding nuclear. So rather being a side is a fake side. Even that's why even the people who defend the religions, they want to use their difference fake. The beginning of the Quran and the beginning of the Old Testament, they both have these parts that say only you defend this part right here. All exceptions where they do defend it criminally foreign influence. Collusions with the part people that already defend it out of sequence. Certain type of victim/hyper victim doesn't want it to be that way. Didn't want from off campuses of all ages and natures. Schools, homeschool, all natures, all exceptions. There have been systems and names uses and database relativity, tactically ulterior from what the Republic was revealed, to keep that led by the identity, the hyper-simultaneous, the singular. It is more probable and is more practical that it forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. Defenses of self syntactically, scientifically, without them realizing, simultaneously use/s of the science's names, tactical terror from what could afford that, and simultaneously to be revealed. The revelations where nature communicates to us. It gives each age of fact treatment nature a certain type of power that it doesn't give the other age. But there are exceptions. In other words, see, we now have been paying attention to the details with the ground, for example, in the kids. And worms no longer walk out of the earth like they used to, and into puddles and into bodies of water. In suburbs, all the grass was shaved. The other ground, the earth had no more food for too long. Hardly any worms at all. And see, when it rains, all the bugs go away, so the birds have no food. The fish don't have the bugs landing on the water. But for some reason, worms walk into bodies of water in the rain. Because nature is about an identity, a positive. So we have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes of precedents that begin with to discern it. You have to begin with the appreciation of the value of sequence, of the truth. But see, that alone means with hyper-evidential goggles into this propagated, self-cultivated roles with predicate acts with facts that have staged collusions at all natures of crime scenes. Just with use/s of time the way it has been used by the criminals. And in other words, it's worse than skewed. It's the same thing. And the difference of it being at the courts or the state corrections offices or the prisons or the state judicial branch offices. They're recorded increasingly crimes with their patients and criminals before they got caught and against innocent people to prevent that from being discerned and with names next to the crime scenes. Even if they're reported, even if they're fake, because they're using rights to lie relative to how we have so many countries shared on off campuses to confess things. The police forms and interbranch confess things when they're pretending not, when they pretend to have integrity, but they don't. So then they force the individual leaders to get angry, in other words. And while people are being evil to the kids and pretending other, and being insidious positive pretending other, while they're simultaneously confessing and demonstrating while pretending other, their roles with all those different countries. And those countries, people do it against their own. They have roles with all kinds of predicate acts with facts, methods, and natures of organized crimes. And roles of where and how anyone had the audacity to speak about crimes while we have the black people's right to rise. And the breaching methods use of that left out and replaced. And relative to the nature of the debate regarding what and how is manifest as it actually is with cities across the world, with suburbs, let alone with cities. In other words, so individuals are told, "Oh, don't look at that. It's something else." Then a whole bunch of individuals are forcing any individual leader, "Don't look at that. Blame it on poverty." It's a torture, extortion, slavery method. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. And names A through Z want to do with this. All you have to do is get Judge Napolitano to file a mandated law so I can show all these countries, Russians and Americans also on Harvard hospitals in the middle of confessing more and more because they had paid conversations with me and they're refusing me medical help. I asked them, in other words, by first of all, by pretending they had conversations with me as people involved that I caught with child offenders, as people also with World Trade Center, Predicate Acts, interstates, as one intercities who I just found out along the way had been pretending fake things in databases tied to me and having people act fake passions and emotions tied to that at corners of buildings because they have there's this preaching method knew that people would take oaths as fakes. And that's all they ever saw. So that's what we could really like this. In other words. In other words, is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They're going to pretend other because they're but they know that they pretend politics means what it doesn't. The voices you hear with passion regarding these things. See the concentrations of shootings tied to schools. One of the parts that's concentrating it there are roles with predicate acts with facts with digital police involved with mental health and ones as with badges and judges associated with it and their family members who have predicate acts with facts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles, criminally foreign influence uses of all locations /S. These are also roles with the names on our Harvard Hospital with Russians and Americans, for example. No Ukrainians made me. Ukrainians are also involved with this at Harvard Hospital. So, in other words, and other nationalities, and they're forging names of other doctors, and they have predicate acts with facts methods with the and nature's has actually recorded as the lawyers there all kinds of scams across the country with databases that no one's looking into people. And in other words, I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to show you that in New York City, these little girls, boys and girls, we're going to refer to it as together. If you guys don't want to, all the people in the cartoon value matrix system, the count are extorted anyway at countries A to Z. But in New York City, the little boys and girls and the men and women are going to count. We're going to all ask for injunctive reliefs. Because little rap guy and friends have the whole cartoon, have New York City, have Hartford, New York City, and the neighboring suburbs and nations counter extorting the whole of the entire cartoon value nature system. So yin yang is about the constant, which is only increasingly valued. Alpha and omega are about the variable, constant. Actually, it is yin yang is about the variable. I mean, the constant / variable. One way left to right, and is about the variable / constant. Like, for example, we are variable relativity to for the forever nature. We are to an extent that we could discern. In other words, there's a little bit more not of physical matter, but of its identity of relationship to itself, that which has species bodies. Not just our species body. There are a little bit more worms, but there are a little less worms now, huh? See, Earth's special difference is being forced from here, these of Hadis, and through and as our own. These of Hadis is more probably having been defined as forced space nature transfer. I have to sign up for Wikipedia. We should define this as forced space nature transfer of Wikipedia. In other words, Judge Napolitano, if you help me, all you have to do is follow me into law, get them on paper, one name and sequence. In other words, regarding the principal child abuser's confessions. And we'll just focus, in other words, because this is very important. Every age and nature of campus has connections to it made that even the people involved with it missed. But we could observe this using the hyper-evidential. There's no Napolitano, because you have world experts speaking about things like wars and logistics and science who are criminally foreign. Like, they're valuing how the science is individually grouped and together. Can't defend how they already have postures of calmness, of relativity, of integrity that was never there. In other words, a quality of fact-keeping nature that can't afford to defend it properly. How there we have a amendment, we have rights that are too numerous to list. The way they're forcing people, the way they're getting away with it, is the way they were shown to by the breaching method, as overt criminal enterprises, private ones, or as judges, prosecutors, their family members, mayors, their neighbors. The difference, everyone next to each other. This propagated, self-cultivated, criminal insidiousness natures of positives in collusion with the negatives that are only allowed collusions with. Slavery, therefore, our own against our own as a human body, species, volume science, now as a tactical ulterior one. That's also why this is the part, we don't have to read this part of the Quran, of the Old Testament, but there's a part of the Old Testament that it points, and that's written with consciousness that the people that would hurt and punish humans for hurting animals, how they have collusions. This is also tied to the shootings when you have the experts, mental health databases, have roles with predicate acts with facts on off the kids' houses and the things, not on the records, but they have ones on the records too. The kids that do communicate with those judges, they have all kinds of natures of organized crime with them and collusions with them. In other words, since they were kids, some of them, including judges and prosecutors, they're tactically delusions raw, two black pupils. We need to get them on paper, one name and sequence. Judge Napolitano, if you don't have let me show you how to think if you think that doctors can think better than you. Because in other words, if you don't believe me that doctors have been forging doctors' names to fake conversations with me, a whole bunch of people as patients and as the people there have ties to the same house of wire crimes on my street, and one's tied to them. And they're sustaining that with the police that are switching names, forging names, and making confessions tied to this biblical law, also a cousin of theirs, and people with the name Corone, or people with the name Scalora. Also, they said it was a cousin of theirs, which is also one of the ones that was brought up by Rob Rodriguez, who was planting evidence on my street with the people involved with untimely deaths at Trinity College, and planting evidence and roles with the same people involved with murders at the time, and the people next to them. In other words, prosecutors, judges involved with it. In other words, it's not all legitimate. Everyone's acting professors, and they go out and pretend they're the Mormon or what gangs and whatever it may be. In other words, these campuses are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. They have the security of these campuses also too. But you have to discern this. You have to follow mandated law properly. And when there's debates about it, you have to have a nature of debate that's sane, because otherwise they'll just say whatever and keep playing these games. And that's why you're going to be leaking more and more. So we're going to go, in other words, where they're doing story, I'll show you how they're not legitimately hiding all the reasons that are truths used that modern countries, identities of law have to hide and lie about things. And in other words, they can't speak for the identity of the law. We're gonna reveal the republic as a function needed. We're gonna reveal hyperpantheism, nature's religion, who disbelieves. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Also, we're going to reveal the scientific delusions and criminal foreign influences roles with readings of books, tactical ulterior because they were leaving out sequence value too with Native Americans. See President/Chief. You guys are leaving out the quality of fact, keeping nature. We need free speech. Get me off the fake speech, WFSB. And so because this is a map uses. You have roles with that Bobby Jean and the people in New Britain involved interstates. Also with a Mark Violet and people with the name Oliveri involved with people next to the campuses, Trinity College and CCSU that also colluded with the people on my street since I was a kid through others. That's why I need those others' names, like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, before and after the World Trade Center attack, rolls of Predicate Acts there with the names that were at the World Trade Center next to it and in the court next to it, which also the court itself post-dated from inside the Ninth Circuit Court in the World Trade Center attack. Please, Judge Napolitano, they have social media and so there are all kinds of digital evidence as predators, only capable of being predators across the board with fact-cheating nature. So this is hyper positive because we could show them guilty together, and we could show how nature shows them what they want too, is to have their minds corrected, including the corrections, the Department of Corrections, and names next to them. Foreign and domestic involved with of Connecticut, involved with the World Trade Center attack interstates, with Washington named Connecticut and interstates, and ones with Manhattan and New York. Same ones involved with digital crimes, with the agencies, remote uses of their identities and differences, and with the courts, and like with their roles with the Facebook pages of private and public campuses, with collusions with the principal child offender and with the family members of a dean judge, involved also intercede with other campuses planting evidences. Quinnipiac University also has rules with this that we're going to examine vaccines. Please, Judge Napolitano, to do what's right and get them on paper, one name and sequence. The police switching names, forging names. Don't have them pretend it's personal. They confess this. Let's go.